Hi, I'm Scott Jaschik. I'm editor of Inside Higher Ed, and I've been writing about issues related to allegations of discrimination against Asian Americans in college admissions for some time. Thank you for your flexibility on the scheduling today. And I wanted to tell you, first of all, thank you for the invitation, but I also wanted to reflect on the fact that when this organization publicized the agenda for today about a month ago on social media, I was attacked for accepting the invitation. And people tweeted that I should not be here. And what I told them, and I will tell you, is that in covering these various issues, I speak to lots of groups. I have spoken on these issues to numerous groups that favor affirmative action, that favor Harvard's position in the current legal case. So to me, I am speaking here today not to endorse the position of anyone here, but in the spirit that by being out and speaking to different groups, I learn, I engage, I let you ask me questions, and so that's why I'm here. I am not endorsing any particular point of view, but that's why I'm here. What I do in these speeches typically is I question the positions of whatever group I'm speaking to. So when I have spoken to groups favoring affirmative action, I've probably raised a lot of questions similar to those you would raise. And today, I'll probably raise some issues that maybe you would prefer I not raise, but I'll raise them anyway because as a journalist, I feel my obligation is to question all sides. So I was asked to comment on a few things. One is the issue of bias in covering Asian Americans, and also bias or perspectives about the current disputes over affirmative action in higher education and how that affects Asian Americans. So in thinking about this, I actually think the press, and I'm talking generally, I will exclude myself, I'll exclude my friend Ben from Politico who is here and who would do none of these things, but journalists generally, I think, are guilty of covering race in literally a black and white manner, particularly in the Northeast, because of the terrible history of the way the United States treated African Americans. That is the narrative that I think too often dominates all discussion of race in the media. And obviously issues of black-white relations remain very important. The status of black Americans remains very important, but it's not all that there is. And I think this affects not only Asian Americans, but also Latino Americans, particularly in the Northeast. Again, I think in the Southwest, it is sort of just too obvious that race relations and American demographics are more than black and white, but I think that's an issue. I think there remains a myth that all Asians are doing well, all Asian Americans are doing well. And obviously, as has been noted here, there's a diversity of experience among Asian Americans, and that needs to be respected. I think there is some hesitancy in the press to write about the extent to which Asian Americans do very well on certain measures of success. I notice when I write about the SAT scores every year, I note the growing gap between Asian Americans and everyone else. I note a lot of other publications don't seem to find that notable. To me, it's sort of one of the obvious stories, and I think the press frequently ignores it. I also think of late, a major issue has been the anti-Chinese tenor of public discussion these days. And I say here anti-Chinese, not anti-Chinese American. Our tensions with China, I think, reverberate and also create bias against Asian Americans, including but not exclusively Chinese Americans. And as we have written about the calls for universities to be tougher on people from China, we have noted that many people feel this encourages racism against Chinese Americans, other Asian Americans, and so forth. So I think the press does have a lot of flaws in the way it covers Asian Americans. Now, in terms of the issue of affirmative action in higher education, I also think that there are challenges to what Harvard and its allies are saying, but I'm going to now ask some questions that I would love to hear from more of you on, not today, but in general. One question I would have for all of you is, why the focus only on elite institutions? And let me give you an example. I have never gotten a call from anyone in this group to talk about community colleges, not once. Never a call of concern about that. Are you aware that, and I bet you many of you are, in California's community colleges, there are 240,000 Asian American students. That is more students than all the students of all ethnicities in the Ivy League. Think about that for a second. If you care about the future of Asian American students and of Asian Americans generally, Harvard might possibly be 10th on your list of things to care about. I'm not saying Harvard isn't important, it is, but it is striking to me that I don't hear from advocates about what goes on in other sectors of higher education. I would love to hear more from people about how they view the concept of meritocracy. I find a lot of people talk about it as if it is pure in college admissions. I would argue it has never been pure in college admissions, but the way it is talked about, why do you really think that? And it might be something that you want, but I would argue that it doesn't exist. Along those lines, I would love to know why people are focused so on affirmative action and not on other measures that evidence in the Harvard case suggests costs Asian American slots at Harvard and elsewhere. If you look at the evidence that has come out in the Harvard case, I think a good case can be made that Harvard's legacy preferences and athletic preferences are costing Asian Americans potentially more slots than Harvard's policies about Black and Latino students. Now, I realize from a legal perspective, they are different issues. OCR has okayed in the past legacy preferences. But the critiques that I hear from this group and other ones aren't just about legal cases. They are about what policy should be. I would love to hear from you about, do you really think legacy preferences are okay? Do you really think athletic preferences are okay? Because it is just striking. Again, I'm a journalist, so I'm cynical about everything. But I notice when there are a bunch of policies that would seem to go against the interests of Asian Americans, and I hear the most about but one of them. And so to me, I'm just curious, why? And is it that these groups are hesitant to speak out against policies that benefit rich white people? Because legacy preferences and athletic preferences, yes, there are some Asians in both groups, some Blacks and Latinos in both groups. By and large, they benefit the advantaged white people. So why do I not hear from you guys about that? And then finally, I would love to hear about you, from you and your allies, what would happen if you win? So imagine, and by win, I don't just mean the Harvard case. Imagine the Harvard case works its way to the Supreme Court, and they say colleges can't consider race and ethnicity anymore, which I actually consider a very live possibility. One of the things I criticize when I speak to college groups is they all say, oh, that will never happen. And I say, have you counted the votes? I actually think it might happen. What's your thought about what happens if you win?
So Scott, I'm gonna
I would just invite you to speak out on more than just what the injustices that you see.
Okay, so thank you. Okay.
Okay, I think Scott, first, thank you for attending our conference. Unfortunately, some people, try to restrain the freedom of speech, give you a hard time, okay? So I support you, I'm very encouraged by you, joining us. I want to answer briefly a couple questions.
Sure.
Unfortunately, you are not attending my opening remark. As a matter of fact, all the issue you already addressed, you asked, we pretty much answered with one or two exceptions. Number one, in terms of all the discriminations, we address not only discrimination in college admission, we also address in K-12, in Washington State's 1000, right? And in my speech, we criticize the legacy system. We also talk about also the corruptions, and also talk about if, say, risk fact being eliminated, what is a better solution, right? How to address the root cause, which causes a lack of diversity in higher education. Is that merit-based admission or failing K-12 education? Should we put Mayor de Blasio, who failed the Black and Hispanic children in education, accountable, or should we blame the admission system we proposed? So that's just a lot of questions being covered. We'll be happy to forward you, all the video, including my opening remark. So let's move to the panel discussion. Thank you very much. Very good question.
Thank
you,
you.
Scott.
And I guess just what I would say is, so last week the College Board announces a change in the SAT. I get bombarded with emails saying this is just another attempt to hurt Asians. And so all I'm saying, I'm just sharing with you what I get as a member of the media, and it's not what you apparently talked about this morning. I would welcome your op-ed saying, why doesn't OCR crack down on legacy admissions? And I hope you'll ask OCR about that. Thank you.
Yeah, please sit down. We have a panel discussion.
Okay, thank
yeah,
you.
have panel discussion. She's going to host.